It all started on a Thursday morning, February 2nd, 2023. I was just back from a beautiful vacation in the sun. It was my first meeting of the day, and I knew back then that I couldn't take it for another meeting. Actually, I knew I couldn't take it for another 5 minutes in front of my desk. After that meeting, I cried uncontrollably for the rest of the day. Then my husband made me call the clinic to get an appointment with the doctor. I saw the doctor the next morning on Friday morning, and she told me that I had all the signs of a professional burnout. So, what were these signs? Hi, my name is Dima Salame, and I am an executive and leadership coach. I help executives and leaders succeed without burning out, without sacrificing their health and their relationships. Losing patience was absolutely one of the early signs that I was on the verge of burnout. I am usually a very patient person. I take pride that I am very patient, whether with my kids or at work or in life in general. And leading up to my burnout, I started catching myself snapping, snapping at home, snapping with my husband, and catching myself from snapping at work. That was definitely a red flag for me. In hindsight, I think what was happening is I was so drained and exhausted that I had very low tolerance for things that usually I could have handled very easily. Resentment was another sign leading up to my burnout. I became resentful about almost everything at work. If somebody did something, I would be resentful. If somebody did not do something, I would be resentful about it too. I became so negative that I started complaining about everything at work. And I am someone so positive that I used to annoy people around me because I always looked for anything positive in any situation. Leading up to my burnout, I started complaining about almost everything. So for me, that was another red flag. The quality of my sleep was definitely a big one. I used to brag about how good of a sleeper I am. I can go to bed and fall asleep in less than 5 minutes and have a very good uninterrupted night of sleep. Even when the kids were babies and I would wake up in the night to feed them, I was able to fall back asleep in no time. Leading up to my burnout, the quality of my sleep really suffered. It would take me a very long time to fall asleep, and I would wake up many times during the night thinking and sometimes dreaming about work. I would bring all the files and all the worries of the day with me to bed. I was in a really very bad vicious circle because lack of sleep leads to burnout, and burnout affects negatively the quality of our sleep. So I was in this vicious circle and I didn't know how to get out of it. I'm sure you can relate to this one. Muscle tension. I used to feel this constant tension in my shoulders and in my neck and in my back. I went to see the massage therapist and she had no idea what was happening in my life. And as soon as she started to work on my back, she stopped to ask me, "What's happening at work? Something is happening because you are tense everywhere." And in addition to the tension in my back and in my shoulders, I used to feel this constant knot in my stomach to a point where I had to remind myself to take deep breaths. It's as if this knot in my stomach was not allowing me to breathe properly, and I had to consciously remind myself to stop and breathe. I know fatigue is an obvious one, but I think it's worth talking about. The kind of fatigue that I felt exhausted and drained at the end of the day. It's that level of exhaustion that talking about my day at supper time felt like a huge undertaking. That I couldn't even read something on my kids' agenda at the end of the day because I could not understand it. It had to wait till the next morning. The little, very simple tasks my brain was not able to accomplish them, or if it was at the end of my workday, my brain felt so foggy and could not think clear that was the level of fatigue that I was feeling for a very long period of time. Another sign that was so out of character for me was crying. I would find myself in a meeting with a colleague and start to cry about something that happened at work or something that was said and or something that was done that I did not agree with. And at one point my colleague stopped and looked at me and she said, "Dima, maybe it's time that you do something about this. You're crying and you don't cry. You're not the type of person who cries at work in a meeting." And of course, that was a sign of emotional fatigue, that I was so emotional and so emotionally drained that I could not control what was happening inside me anymore. And it was all manifesting in a lot of crying. This one was a big one for me, doubting myself. When you're in this cycle of burnout and you don't know how to get out of it, you start doubting yourself. You start asking, what is my value? You start asking, am I making a difference? You start asking yourself, what is the point of all this? What is the purpose of all this hard work if nothing is changing, if nothing is happening, and if I'm feeling like this all the time? So, definitely, how you see yourself, how you see your worth and your value suffers during a burnout. These were my signs. If you've been feeling overwhelmed, tired, exhausted, stop and look for the signs. Your body is trying to tell you something. Don't ignore it. Listen to the signs. You're only granted one life. You should be living it, thriving, and not surviving.